At 30,000 feet, while the world below looked like a blurred painting of light and shadow, a man who seemed to have everything finally lost control. His name was Luke Carter, a millionaire known for power, precision, and a life built on never trembling. But tonight in seat 14A, no one could see the storm he carried inside. The aircraft shook, the overhead lights flickered, and for the first time in years, the man who controlled empires couldn't control his own heartbeat. The turbulence grew stronger, rattling the cabin as if the sky itself were testing him. Luke closed his eyes, jaw tight, breath shallow, doing everything he could to hide the panic clawing its way up his chest. His success had opened every door in the world, except the one he was most desperate to find right now. Peace. Then she appeared. Mia Thompson, simple, calm, holding a small Bible worn at the edges, sat beside him at the exact moment the plane hit another violent shake. Not by accident, by design. Unlike Luke, she wasn't shaken. She breathed as if she trusted something he had long forgotten. She noticed the tremor in his hands before he even did. And while everyone else looked around nervously, Mia looked only at him, with quiet compassion, not curiosity. Then she did something tiny, almost invisible to the rest of the world, but unforgettable to Luke. She gently reached over and placed her hand on his. It felt like time paused, like heaven leaned closer. In that instant, Luke didn't just feel a touch, he felt presence. Something warm, grounding, unexplainably steady. What followed wasn't simply a conversation, it was an intervention. A rescue mission disguised as a moment between strangers. A divine encounter 30,000 feet above the ground. And tonight, as you hear this story, maybe you'll understand something too. Sometimes God allows the turbulence, just to seat you next to the person who will help you breathe again. Stay with me until the end. You're going to feel why. Luke Carter stepped into the airport terminal with the same determined stride that made executives freeze the moment he entered a room. His phone buzzed nonstop. Assistants waiting for orders, investors demanding decisions. Power followed him like a shadow, but anxiety did too. The kind he never admitted existed. The kind he had spent years burying under achievement. He checked his watch for the 5th time in 2 minutes. The flight was on schedule, but his pulse wasn't. Something in his chest felt tight, like memories he didn't want to revisit. He hated flying. He always had. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't explain, the fear was worse. People around him moved with excitement. Families taking vacations, couples holding hands, students with backpacks. Luke envied them. They weren't being chased by deadlines or haunted by headlines. They weren't fighting invisible battles behind neatly pressed shirts. They simply existed. He couldn't remember the last time he felt that free. As he approached the gate, he repeated the same lie he always told himself before boarding. You're fine. You're in control. But it didn't settle him. Not tonight. Not with the turbulence forecast flashing red on the screens. His breathing grew shallow, but he pushed onward. An airline employee greeted him kindly, but Luke barely nodded. Small gestures of care rarely reached him anymore. His world was built on pressure, performance, and perfection. To be weak, even for a moment, felt dangerous. So he stuffed the fear deeper, hoping it wouldn't surface before landing. He walked down the jet bridge, trying to disguise the tremor creeping into his hands. Every step echoed a memory he wasn't ready to face. Years ago, a friend of his had been in a plane accident, an event Luke never fully processed. Since then, every flight felt like a countdown he was forced to survive. Inside the cabin, he scanned for seat 14A, business class. The section meant to be calm, luxurious, quiet. But the air felt tight, charged with a pressure that made his nerves burn. He placed his bag overhead, his movements stiff, mechanical, rehearsed. Control. He needed control. Luke sat down, running his fingers along the armrest as if grounding himself. His heart thudded painfully against his ribs. He loosened his tie, trying to breathe deeper, trying to ignore the familiar signs of panic rising like a tide. He whispered silently, "Not here. Not again." Passengers continued boarding, the aisle a blur of footsteps and conversations. Luke avoided eye contact with everyone. Vulnerability felt too close, too dangerous. He leaned his head back, eyes shut, silently bargaining with God, though he wouldn't call it prayer. just desperation. A flight attendant approached with a polite smile. "Mr. Carter, can I get you anything before takeoff?" He hesitated. "Water? No. Calming tea? No. Just give me a moment," he muttered. She nodded, sensing the tension he was trying to swallow. Luke opened the window shade, staring at the runway lights glowing through the dusk. The sky looked calm, deceptively calm. He couldn't shake the feeling that something inside him was cracking, a fracture he'd hidden behind business deals and boardrooms for far too long. As he tried to ground himself, a group of passengers laughed a few rows back. The sound was light, carefree, the exact opposite of what he felt. He envied them. He hated that envy. He hated that fear. But mostly, he hated that no amount of money could fix the storm inside his chest. His phone buzzed one last time before he turned it off. A message from his assistant. "Everything is under control, sir." Control. If only that were true. His entire life was a carefully constructed fortress built to prevent moments exactly like this one. The seat beside him remained empty for a moment, and Luke exhaled in relief. At least he wouldn't have to pretend to be fine for anyone. Maybe he could survive the flight unseen, unnoticed. Maybe he could fight the panic quietly, alone. Then he heard soft footsteps approaching. A gentle presence. A scent of lavender and rain. Someone slid into the seat beside him. Luke glanced sideways and froze. She looked nothing like the world he came from. Simple clothes, soft eyes, a small Bible tucked into her bag. Calm. Completely calm. Mia Thompson offered him a warm smile, the kind that didn't try to impress or intrude. "Hi," she said softly. Something inside him tightened, not in fear, but in recognition. She wasn't like anyone he had met in years, and that scared him in a different way. Luke nodded stiffly, trying to hide the tremor in his fingers. Mia noticed anyway. Her eyes were kind, but clear, like she could see pain he'd never confessed. He straightened in his seat, desperate to appear composed. He failed. As the plane doors closed and the engines roared to life, Luke felt the familiar terror rise. The panic he'd fought so long surged toward the surface. But this time, something was different. He wasn't alone. Mia was beside him, steady, present, without even knowing she'd been placed there for a reason. Mia settled into her seat with the quiet confidence of someone who trusted the journey long before she saw the destination. She placed her small Bible gently in the seat pocket, as if setting down something precious. Luke watched her from the corner of his eye, puzzled. How could someone look so at ease inside a metal tube suspended in the sky? She fastened her seatbelt and offered him a quick, reassuring smile. Luke tried to return it, but his lips barely moved. Mia didn't seem offended. She simply observed him with the calm attentiveness of someone who cared without needing a reason. It was unnerving and strangely comforting. The flight attendants continued preparing the cabin, giving safety instructions. Luke tried to listen, but his heartbeat drowned out every word. Mia, however, nodded attentively, hands folded neatly on her lap. Her peace wasn't loud. It was steady, like a warm lamp in a dark room. A small shake ran through the aircraft as it taxied toward the runway. Passengers murmured, some laughing, some anxious. Luke's breath hitched. His fingers tightened on the armrest until his knuckles whitened. Mia noticed. She didn't stare. She simply turned her body slightly toward him, present, grounded. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Her voice was gentle but not fragile. It carried weight, like it knew how to stand in storms. Luke cleared his throat, forcing composure. "I'm fine," he lied. Mia nodded slowly. She didn't believe him, but she didn't push either. As the plane lined up on the runway, she closed her eyes for a brief moment. Luke thought she was praying. He wasn't sure why that bothered him, or why it soothed him. He looked away quickly, embarrassed by how much her presence affected him already. The engines roared loud and powerful. The force pushed them back into their seats as the plane accelerated. Luke's heart raced faster than the aircraft. He swallowed hard, trying to steady his breath, but every second felt like a climb he wasn't prepared for. Mia opened her eyes and glanced quietly at him. She didn't judge. She didn't pretend not to see. She simply noticed, and somehow that noticing made the panic feel less suffocating. Her calm didn't demand anything from him. It just existed. As the plane lifted off the ground, the cabin shook with turbulence. Passengers gasped. Luke's entire body tensed, breath trapped in his throat. His vision blurred at the edges. Panic rose like a tidal wave. Mia leaned slightly closer, not touching him yet, but anchoring him with her presence. "You're safe," she said softly. Luke's jaw clenched. How could she be so sure? He tried to speak, but the words dissolved. Instead, he looked out the window as the city shrank beneath them. The aircraft bounced again, a sudden drop that made several people gasp. Luke gripped the armrest, every muscle locked. Mia watched him carefully, her eyes full of concern and something else. Faith. The quiet kind that didn't need explanations. She took a slow breath, almost exaggeratedly calm, as if modeling something for him. Luke tried to mimic her breathing, but it came out shaky. "It's just turbulence," she whispered. "It can't take you down." He almost laughed. Except nothing felt funny. Another jolt hit the plane, and Luke felt his control slipping. His heartbeat pounded in his ears. Sweat gathered on his palms. Memories he'd tried to bury clawed their way back. Flashes of headlines, sirens, a phone call that changed him forever. Mia placed her hand lightly on the armrest between them, not touching him yet, but close enough for him to notice. Her fingers were steady, warm, patient. Luke realized she was giving him the choice, to reach out or not. It was the first kindness he'd been offered in a long time. He forced his gaze away from the window and looked at her. Really looked. The softness in her expression wasn't pity, it was understanding. A kind of empathy he didn't know how to receive. His chest ached, not from fear this time, but from something deeper. The plane shuddered again. Luke flinched involuntarily. Mia's brows knitted with gentle concern. Without overthinking, she whispered, "You're not alone." Such simple words. But they felt like a lifeline tossed into a storm. Luke's throat tightened. Why did her presence feel like safety? Why did her calm feel stronger than his fear? For a moment, he let the truth slip through the cracks of his pride. He didn't want to do this alone anymore. Then, as if guided by something greater, Mia slowly reached over and placed her hand on top of his. Warm, steady, rooted. Luke inhaled sharply, and for the first time since boarding, he felt his heartbeat slow. Mia's peace was becoming his anchor. The moment Mia's hand touched his, something shifted inside Luke, something he hadn't felt in years. Not control, not confidence, something quieter, gentler, almost holy. The cabin lights flickered again, and the plane dipped slightly, but for a brief second the terror loosened its grip. Still, his breath trembled. The engines roared louder as the aircraft climbed through a thick patch of clouds. The turbulence intensified, shaking the cabin like a warning. A child cried a few rows ahead. Luggage rattled overhead, and Luke felt his chest closing in, breath by breath. He squeezed his eyes shut, shoulders tightening painfully. Panic surged again. Raw, electric, overwhelming. It took everything in him not to break completely. His mind raced, replaying flashes of the past. The phone call, the news, the loss he never dared to speak about. Mia's thumb brushed the back of his hand, slow and deliberate, grounding him back into the moment. "Look at me," she whispered. He hesitated, but something in her voice, steady, confident, pulled him out of the spiral. He turned his head toward her. Her expression was calm but not detached. She wasn't pretending the turbulence wasn't happening. She simply wasn't threatened by it. "You're okay," she murmured. Luke shook his head, barely breathing. "No, I'm not." It was the closest he had come to honesty in years. The plane jolted again, a hard drop that made several passengers gasp. Luke's heartbeat skyrocketed. He felt dizzy, heat crawling up his neck. His vision blurred as panic flooded his senses. He tried to breathe, but each inhale felt like a battle he was losing. Mia leaned in slightly, her voice softer but somehow stronger. "Luke, follow my breathing." She inhaled slowly, deeply, then exhaled like she was releasing a secret. Luke tried. His breath stuttered. But the moment he matched her rhythm, even a little, the panic softened. Outside the window, the sky was a wild canvas of dark clouds and streaks of lightning far in the distance. Each burst of light illuminated the tension on Luke's face. He wasn't just scared of flying. He was scared of losing control. Scared of falling apart in front of someone. Mia's hand remained steady on his. "You're safe," she said again, her voice almost a prayer. Luke swallowed, his throat tight. "How can you be so sure?" Mia tilted her head gently. "Because fear doesn't have the final say up here." He stared at her, confused and desperate. What does that even mean? Mia didn't preach. She didn't force faith on him. She simply let truth sit between them like a lantern in a dark cabin. "It means you're held," she said softly, "even when everything shakes." Another sudden jolt made Luke flinch violently. His breath escaped in a sharp gasp. A flight attendant nearly lost her balance but regained composure quickly. People murmured prayers, curses, nervous laughter. But Mia remained anchored, unshaken. Her hand tightened around Luke's just a little, enough to pull him back from the edge. "You're not going down," she murmured. His voice cracked. "You don't know that." But she didn't waver. "I know you're not alone." Luke's eyes burned. Not from fear, but from the unfamiliar sting of being seen. Really seen. Mia wasn't afraid of his weakness. She wasn't intimidated by his status. In a world full of people who wanted something from him, she was simply there. As the turbulence continued, Luke felt something break loose inside him. Not panic, but truth. "I hate flying," he admitted, breath shaking. "I always have." Mia nodded gently, her gaze steady. "You don't have to pretend with me." No one had ever told him that before. He took another breath, still shaky but deeper than before. "It's stupid," he muttered. Mia shook her head softly. "Fear isn't stupid. Silence is." Her words slid into a place inside him that had been locked for years. The plane bumped again, but this time, Luke didn't feel like he was drowning. Mia's presence created a small pocket of calm around them, a sanctuary in seat 14A. He realized something startling. Her peace was contagious. His breathing slowed, his shoulders lowered. The panic didn't disappear completely, but it loosened its claws. Luke stared at the seat in front of him, trembling still, but not alone in the trembling. He whispered, almost ashamed, "I don't know how to handle this." Mia leaned slightly closer, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "Then let me help you." And somehow, in a storm he couldn't control, Luke Carter, powerful, untouchable Luke, finally surrendered a piece of his fear. Not to the sky, but to the peace sitting right beside him. For a moment it felt like the sky itself was holding its breath. The turbulence eased just enough for the cabin to fall into an uneasy calm. Luke's heartbeat was still racing, but slower than before. Mia's hand never left his. He didn't know it yet, but the real shaking was about to happen inside him. The captain's voice crackled over the intercom, distorted by static. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're passing through a rough weather system." Luke's muscles tensed again at the word rough. But then the captain added, "There's no danger, just discomfort." Luke wished anyone had said that about his life. Mia watched him quietly while the announcement played. Most people relaxed after hearing "no danger." Luke didn't. His fear didn't listen to logic. It listened to memories and worst-case scenarios. That's when Mia did something that surprised him. "Luke," she said softly, his name a steady anchor in the noise. He blinked, startled that she used it so gently. He didn't remember telling her. She nodded toward his lap, where his boarding pass still showed his name. "Sorry," she added with a small smile. "I read it without asking." He almost laughed. The sound stuck somewhere between nerves and relief. "Most people say my name like they want something from me," he admitted. "Business, favors, deals." Mia tilted her head thoughtfully. "I don't want anything from you," she replied. "I just don't want you to drown in a storm you're not meant to die in." Her words hit harder than the turbulence had. He stared at her, unsure how to process honesty that pure. "You talk like this happens a lot," he muttered. "Panicking strangers on planes. Mia shook her head slowly. No. Men who think they have to be invincible. The plane shivered again, a ripple through the cabin. Someone gasped behind them. A woman whispered a quick prayer. Luke swallowed hard, tension surging. But Mia didn't flinch. Instead, she did the most unexpected thing yet. She started talking about herself. I used to hate flying too, she said calmly. Luke frowned. You? You look like you're on a floating couch. She smiled, eyes dropping for a second. I wasn't always like this. Her thumb traced an absent-minded circle on his hand, as if drawing a memory out. There was a time, Mia continued, when I couldn't even get on a bus without feeling like my heart was going to explode. Luke blinked, surprised. He hadn't expected vulnerability in return for his weakness. I had panic attacks so bad I thought I was dying. She glanced at him. Every single time. The plane dipped again, but now his curiosity competed with his fear. What changed? He asked, the question leaving his lips before he could stop it. Mia's gaze turned distant for a moment, as if revisiting a sacred, painful place. Someone sat beside me, she said quietly, and refused to let me believe fear was the only voice I had to listen to. Luke's breath caught in his throat. That sounds familiar, he whispered. Mia smiled softly. Exactly. She paused, then added, but that wasn't the shocking part. He felt a hook tighten around his attention. What was? They didn't just comfort me, she said. They reminded me of a truth I had forgotten, that I wasn't holding my life together. Her eyes met his, steady and bright, that someone else was. Luke's chest tightened at the implication. You're talking about God, he said, almost defensively. The word tasted strange in his mouth, like something he'd swallowed once and choked on. Mia didn't argue. She just nodded. I'm talking about the one who doesn't shake when you do. A fresh wave of turbulence rattled the cabin, as if to underline her words. The overhead bins rattled, and a few people cried out. Luke braced himself, expecting his panic to spike again. But something surprising happened. The fear rose. Yet it hit a wall of calm he didn't build. Mia leaned a little closer, her voice almost a whisper against the roar of the engines. Luke, what if this isn't just about you being afraid of flying? He stiffened. What else would it be about? Her next words slid in like a key in a long locked door. What if this is about something you never grieved, she said. Something that never landed inside you, so it's been shaking you ever since. His stomach dropped deeper than the plane ever could. How could she be this close to the truth without knowing anything about him? He stared at her, stunned. He opened his mouth to deflect, to make a joke, to push it away. But no words came. Instead, a single image flashed behind his eyes. Sirens, rain, a news report. A name he still couldn't say without breaking. Mia saw the shift in his expression. There it is, she whispered gently. The real turbulence. The plane steadied for a moment, but Luke didn't. His carefully built walls were cracking, mid-air, in front of a stranger who felt anything but random. Mia's hand remained wrapped around his, patient, unhurried. When you're ready, she said softly, tell me what you lost. Luke stared ahead, heart pounding, because for the first time, he was actually thinking about doing it. For a long moment, Luke didn't speak. The cabin hummed with engine noise, the kind that vibrated into bones. Mia watched him with quiet patience, not pushing, not rushing. Luke swallowed hard, fighting the urge to shut down. But the storm inside him was louder than the one outside. I lost someone, he said finally, voice low, almost inaudible. His fingers curled around the armrest, knuckles white. Mia nodded gently, encouraging, but silent. Luke drew in a shaky breath. It happened, a long time ago, but it never left. The plane shook lightly, but Luke barely noticed now. His eyes were fixed on something Mia couldn't see, a memory locked behind a door he had never dared open. He was my closest friend, Luke said, blinking slowly. My brother in everything but blood. Mia's expression softened. What was his name? Luke hesitated, as if the name itself carried weight. Daniel, he whispered. The word trembled out of him like something fragile. And he died in a plane crash. The sentence hit the air with the force of a confession. Mia's breath caught softly, not in shock, but in empathy. Luke looked down at his hands, ashamed of how much they shook. It was years ago, he said, but it feels like yesterday. He blinked hard, trying to steady himself. He was terrified of flying, Luke continued, voice cracking. And I kept telling him, don't be dramatic, Dan. Nothing ever happens. He shut his eyes, pained. The last call we had, I told him to stop being a coward. His voice broke, and then he never came home. Mia didn't gasp. She didn't pity him. She simply breathed out a small, heartfelt, Luke. Her tone held the kind of compassion that could hold grief without breaking. Luke felt something deep inside him shift, like a locked door opening an inch. I've blamed myself ever since, he whispered. I replay that conversation every week, every flight. He shook his head as emotion tightened his throat. If I hadn't pushed him, if I hadn't mocked him, he swallowed. He might still be alive. Mia's hand tightened gently around his. That wasn't your fault, she said softly. Luke let out a bitter laugh. Isn't it? All I did was pressure him. I didn't listen. I didn't see his fear. He looked away. I failed him. You were young, Mia said gently. You didn't know how heavy words can be. Luke breathed sharply, stung by the truth. But guilt doesn't resurrect the past, she added. It only buries the living. The words hit him harder than he expected. He turned toward her, startled. What do you mean, bury the living? Mia held his gaze, steady and kind. You're alive, Luke, but your guilt has kept you in the crash with him. He froze, breath caught in his chest. No one had ever dared speak that kind of truth to him. Everyone respected his boundaries or feared them, but Mia wasn't intimidated by his status or his silence. She cared more about his soul than his reputation. And every time the plane shakes, she said softly, your heart goes back to that moment. Luke exhaled shakily. Exactly, he admitted. It's like I'm watching it happen again. The confession left him trembling. Mia's expression held deep understanding, not analysis. You're not grieving the crash, she whispered. You're grieving the words you never got to take back. Luke's breath hitched. The truth was sharper than fear. He looked down at their hands, hers steady, his trembling. Daniel was the one person who knew me before all of this, he said quietly. The business, the money, the pressure. He knew the real Luke. He blinked hard. He believed in me when I didn't deserve it. Mia nodded, tears gathering in her eyes. Compassion, not sadness. And you loved him, she said gently. Luke swallowed, his throat aching with emotion he'd buried for years. Yes, he whispered. He was family. The word cracked in the air like lightning. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The plane hummed steadily now, as if even the storm outside paused to listen. Luke breathed deeply, painfully but fully. It felt like the first real breath he'd taken in years. Mia squeezed his hand. You didn't cause the crash, she said softly, but you've punished yourself as if you did. Luke stared at her, heart pounding at the revelation. And that's why we're here, Mia whispered, so you can finally stop blaming yourself at 30,000 feet. For several minutes, Luke sat there in stunned silence, breathing harder than he wanted Mia to notice. Opening old wounds felt dangerous, like stepping barefoot into broken glass. Yet, strangely, it also felt like healing. Mia's presence didn't make the grief heavier. It made it bearable. The plane shifted gently, riding another pocket of turbulence. Luke didn't flinch as violently this time, and that surprised him. Maybe it was because he was already shaken on the inside, or maybe because someone finally knew the truth. He wasn't carrying it alone anymore. Mia watched him carefully as if deciding whether he was ready for the next step. Luke, she said softly, can I ask you something? He swallowed, nodding hesitantly. Her expression softened even more. Can I pray for you? Luke froze. Pray? For him? No one had prayed for him since his mother decades ago. He didn't know whether to laugh, refuse, or break down. But instead he whispered, Why? Because you're hurting, Mia replied. And because you've carried something alone for far too long. She squeezed his hand gently. Fear doesn't leave a heart by force. It leaves when peace finally has permission to enter. Luke exhaled shakily, staring at the seat in front of him. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Mia smiled. You don't have to do anything. Her voice was warm, low, steady. Just let me speak peace over you. He hesitated again, pride trying to rise, fear clinging to old walls. But he was tired of pretending, tired of shaking in silence, tired of being haunted by a moment he could never change. So he nodded slowly. Okay, you can pray. Mia turned slightly toward him, still holding his hand. She didn't close her eyes dramatically or bow her head in a rehearsed way. She simply breathed in, deep and calm, and the entire atmosphere around them shifted. Luke felt it instantly, a warmth, soft but unmistakable. God, Mia whispered, her voice barely audible over the engines. You see, Luke, not the businessman, not the mask, but the soul. Luke's breath hitched. She continued gently. You know the fear he carries and the guilt he never deserved to hold. The words felt like they unraveled years of silence in his chest. Bring peace where panic has lived, Mia prayed. Bring forgiveness where blame has settled. Bring comfort where memories still wound him. Luke closed his eyes for the first time since takeoff, and instead of darkness, he felt warmth. The plane shook again, hard, but this time, Luke didn't gasp or grip the armrest. He tightened his hold on Mia's hand instead. Mia didn't pause. Cover him, she whispered. Hold him steady, even when the sky isn't. Luke felt something strange happening inside him. Not numbness, not panic. Something like release. Like the tight fists around his heart were slowly opening. Mia's voice softened even more. Remind Luke that Daniel's story didn't end in that moment. And his life isn't meant to stay trapped there either. A single tear escaped down Luke's cheek before he could stop it. He didn't look away this time. Let this fear lose its grip tonight, Mia prayed. Let this flight become a place of healing, not torment. Luke felt the words settle into him like warm light. He wasn't used to being spoken to with such gentleness. It disarmed him more than the turbulence ever could. Mia finally opened her eyes, meeting his gaze fully. You don't have to be strong right now, she whispered. Luke inhaled sharply. No one had ever told him that. Not once. Not ever. The plane hit another small bump, but Luke barely reacted. The fear was still there, but it no longer owned him. It felt smaller, quieter, overshadowed by the calm Mia carried. He wiped his cheek, embarrassed but grateful. Mia, thank you. She smiled in that gentle, grounding way of hers. Peace isn't something you earn, Luke, she said softly. It's something you receive. He stared at her, heart shaking in a way that wasn't fear, a way that felt like hope. As the plane steadied into smooth air for the first time in over an hour, Luke realized something unexpected. The storm outside had calmed at the same exact moment the storm inside him did. He wasn't sure if it was coincidence. But Mia? She looked like someone who already knew the answer. For several minutes after Mia finished praying, Luke simply sat there, silent, unmoving, trying to understand what had just happened to him. The cabin still hummed with engine noise, the dim lights casting a soft glow over the passengers. But inside him something was different, lighter, unfamiliar. Like a window had opened where there used to be a locked door. He glanced at the window again. The sky was calmer now, streaked with soft gray clouds instead of chaos. But what stunned him wasn't the change outside. It was the change inside his own chest. His heartbeat, once wild and loud, had softened into a pace he could finally breathe through. Luke exhaled slowly, testing the feeling. Was this peace? Real peace? Not the kind you fake in boardrooms or buy in expensive spas? He wasn't sure. But whatever it was, he wasn't ready to let it go. Mia watched him quietly, her expression gentle and knowing. She didn't speak, didn't push, didn't ask for a reaction. She simply sat with him, as if presence alone was enough. And for the first time in years, Luke didn't feel the need to hide behind a mask. Not with her. I feel strange, Luke admitted, his voice low. Mia tilted her head. Strange how? He searched for the right words. Like something loosened, he said. Like, I'm not fighting myself anymore. A soft smile touched Mia's lips. That's what happens when peace enters a place fear has lived too long. Luke looked down at their hands, still lightly touching. He didn't pull away. He didn't want to. Another surprise hit him. He wasn't thinking about the turbulence. He wasn't mentally rehearsing disaster scenarios. He wasn't bracing for impact. He was thinking about Daniel differently. It terrified him how much truth Mia had spoken. He had stayed in the crash all these years, stuck in guilt, stuck in what-ifs, stuck in shame he never deserved to carry. But now, something felt unlocked. Like his heart had taken its first breath after being underwater too long. He rubbed his chest gently, confused by the sensation. Was this what healing began to feel like? Mia finally spoke, her voice soft enough not to startle him. Luke, you know you didn't kill Daniel, right? He swallowed hard, the reflex automatic. I know that logically, he whispered, but logic never helped me breathe. That's because guilt doesn't listen to logic, Mia replied. It listens to lies that disguise themselves as responsibility. Luke stared at her, stunned by how precisely she named the war inside him. How do you know that? He asked quietly. Mia's answer sent a chill through him. Because I carried guilt that wasn't mine too, she said. The confession caught him completely off guard. He blinked. You? Her nod was slow, but certain. I spent years believing I had to make up for something I never caused, she continued. Years thinking suffering was the price for my past. Luke's chest tightened, not in panic, but empathy. Pain recognizes pain, and hers mirrored his in a way he didn't expect. But one day, Mia said softly, someone reminded me that grace doesn't ask for repayment. It just asks to be received. Luke felt that sentence pierce him like sunlight through heavy clouds. Grace? He repeated, the word strange and warm in his mouth. Mia nodded gently. It meets you where you break. Luke turned to the window again, watching the clouds drift peacefully. He felt like he was watching a metaphor unfold in real time. The storm had passed, not just outside, inside too. He took a slow breath, steady and full. I don't want to keep living like this, he whispered. Mia's eyes softened with something close to pride. Then don't. Her simplicity stunned him. I want to be someone different, Luke confessed. Someone Daniel would have been proud of. Someone who isn't hiding behind control. Someone who knows how to breathe again. The admission felt like opening a window in a house sealed shut. Mia squeezed his hand one last time before gently releasing it. Then this flight wasn't an accident, she whispered. Luke swallowed, startled by how deeply he believed her. For the first time in years, he wasn't chained to the past. He was reaching for who he could still become. The descent began with a gentle chime from the overhead speakers. Passengers stirred, adjusting seatbelts and stretching stiff legs. But Luke remained still, staring ahead as if returning from a long journey. Even though the flight had barely been 2 hours, something inside him had shifted so deeply it felt like he had crossed continents. His heart wasn't the same heart that had boarded this plane. Mia glanced at him softly. You okay? She asked. Luke nodded, but not the hollow nod he used to give strangers. This time it felt true. I think I'm better than okay. The plane dipped gently as it aligned with the runway. Luke didn't tense, didn't brace, didn't clutch the armrest. He simply breathed, slow, steady, grounded. He looked out the window, watching city lights flicker like scattered prayers across the dark ground. Each light felt symbolic, meaningful, like reminders of moments he had missed while living inside fear. Moments he now wanted to reclaim. Moments he wasn't going to waste again. I don't know how to thank you, Luke said quietly. Mia smiled at him. Then don't try, she replied. Just live lighter than you did before. The simplicity hit him like unexpected grace. Luke let out a breathy laugh. You make everything sound so easy. Mia shook her head. "It's not easy," she said softly. "It's just possible." And for some reason, Luke believed her. The wheels touched the runway with a gentle thud. A few passengers clapped softly, relieved. Luke closed his eyes, not in fear but in gratitude. The ground felt steady. So did he. As the plane slowed, Luke felt a warmth rise in his chest, like hope stretching after a long sleep. He blinked, overwhelmed by its unexpected strength. "I haven't felt this in years," he whispered. Mia tilted her head. "What does it feel like?" Luke hesitated. "Like I'm allowed to breathe." People began standing, retrieving bags, filling the aisle. Luke and Mia remained seated, unhurried. He wasn't ready for the moment to end. Not yet. Not before he said what mattered. "Mia," he began, voice lower now, almost reverent. "You didn't have to sit here with me. You didn't have to care." Mia met his gaze steadily. "I didn't do anything extraordinary," she said. "But someone extraordinary did." Her words sent a gentle shock through him. "Do you really think God had something to do with this?" Mia didn't look away. "I don't think," she whispered. "I know." He swallowed, the truth settling over him like warm air. She wasn't talking about coincidence. She wasn't talking about luck. She was talking about purpose. And Luke felt, for the first time, that he had been seen by heaven. When they finally stood, he reached for his bag but stopped. Not from fear, but because he didn't want to walk out of this moment unchanged. "Mia, can I ask something?" She nodded, curious. "Why me?" he asked, voice barely steady. "Why would God send someone like you to someone like me?" Mia inhaled softly, as if the answer came from somewhere above them. "Because storms reveal who we really are," she whispered. "And God knew you were ready to stop pretending." Luke stared at her, stunned by how deeply her words hit the place he had kept hidden for so long. "Ready," he repeated quietly. He hadn't realized it until now, but she was right. He was ready. They stepped into the aisle together. For a second, Luke thought she might disappear into the crowd, lost in the river of passengers, but she didn't rush. She walked beside him, steady, calm, purposeful, just as she had during the storm. At the exit, Mia paused and touched his arm lightly. "You're not who boarded this plane," she said softly, "and you don't have to go back to being him." Luke felt the words settle deep into him like a promise, a new beginning he didn't know he was allowed to have. As they stepped off the aircraft, the cool airport air brushed his face. Luke inhaled fully, the way a man breathes after resurrection. He glanced at Mia, this stranger who became a turning point. "God sent peace at 30,000 feet, he murmured. Mia smiled. "And it's yours to carry now." Luke walked through the airport like a man seeing the world for the first time. Not because anything around him had changed, but because he had. For years he lived inside fear, control, guilt, and a silence so heavy it felt like a second skin. But one flight, one storm, one unexpected seat assignment had rewritten everything. He glanced at the window overlooking the runway. Just hours before, those skies had terrified him. Now they reminded him of something profound, that even above the clouds, even in the shaking, even in the fear, God had not abandoned him. Mia walked beside him with that same peaceful steadiness that held him together mid-air. She didn't preach. She didn't pressure. She simply carried light where he had carried darkness. And somehow, without ever trying to impress him, she had changed his life. "Thank you," he whispered again. Not to repay her, but to honor the moment that had become a turning point. Mia placed a hand over her heart and nodded. "Peace was always meant to find you, Luke. Tonight, it finally did." They parted ways with a final smile. Not an ending, but a beginning. A reminder that healing doesn't shout. Sometimes it whispers beside you at 30,000 feet. And when Luke stepped back into his life, he did so lighter, freer, and finally ready to live again. Because sometimes God doesn't calm the storm first. Sometimes he sends someone to sit beside you until the storm inside you ends. And for Luke, peace didn't come when the plane landed. It came the moment he stopped running from the truth and let grace take a seat beside him. If this story touched you, don't leave without subscribing. Every day, God sends a new message, a new reminder, a new whisper of hope, and you never know which one will be the one that heals you too. So hit subscribe, leave your amen in the comments, and share this video with someone who might be fighting their own storm in silence. Let's spread grace, peace, and stories that change hearts, one flight at a time.